I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Jeff Deskovic. Jeff's story is pretty amazing. In high school, he was convicted of a crime, served 16 years, and eventually was found to be innocent. He is finding it his work to help other people who've been convicted of crimes who are innocent. Join me in my conversation with Jeff Deskovic. I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Jeff Deskovic. Good morning, fine sir.
Good morning to you as well.
Yeah, I have the night, but it's still nice to be talking with you. Jeff, will you do us a little bit of a favor and give us a snapshot of what you're doing now and who you are? I did give a brief introduction, but just a quick little snapshot, and I'd like to bring you back.
Yes, I run the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, which frees wrongfully convicted people. So far, we've freed 10 people, and we pursue policy changes aimed at preventing that. We helped pass 3 laws, and then as part of a broader coalition group called It Could Happen to You, which I'm an advisory board member of, we helped pass 4 additional laws. I'm an advocate in the field. I frequently speak across the world, and I do frequent media interviews and regularly meet with elected officials and testify on behalf of various criminal justice reform measures. I'm an attorney. And lastly, I have a documentary short, which is available on Amazon Prime, called Conviction, about my advocacy work.
Now, Jeff, I truly appreciate the work you're doing. I think it can't be said enough for a man who has been in your plight, if that is a proper word. And normally for my 89 episodes so far, I would say, can we go back? Now, for you, your story, the main part of the difficulty in your life started what happened in high school. But did you happen, just because this is a podcast about work, and I think you're doing a great job in the work that you do, but did you happen to have a job before all of this nightmare happened in your life when you were a teenager? Did you have a job, something that got you out of the house?
I was a paper boy.
Very good. Do you know what, Jeff? Most of the people that I've interviewed, they're Paperboy or, McDonald's or something like that. But that's great. How old were you when you started to throw the old papers?
14 or 15 years old.
Very good. And why did you get that job? What got you out of the house to get a paper route?
I don't recall the exact sequence of events, but I know that I was approached. I was approached to do it, and some of my friends were beginning to get light jobs, as you mentioned, of one kind or another, and the idea of earning some money was kind of intriguing to me.
Now that I think of it, I'm thinking in my mind, how am I going to conduct this interview well and being respectful? And not only that, anyone can go online, and you are all over the place if anyone looks up your name to find out the whole story, different aspects of the story. But when you were 16, this is the beginning of the nightmare. And maybe you can go into that a little bit, but I think I might have a little twist to my questioning after that.
Sure. When I was 16, the year was 1990. It was Peekskill in Westchester County. It was suburbs in New York, and it was middle class, ethnically diverse, and crimes were pretty rare there in general. And one of my classmates, who was in 2 of my classes as a freshman, one as a sophomore, she went missing, and ultimately her body was found a couple of days later. And so that set off like a general atmosphere of fear, rumor, paranoia. And after school, I was kind of like the life of the party, one of the 2 main kids, and whatever I would suggest would be what we would do, whether that was basketball, ride bikes, play Monopoly, video games, that kind of thing. But in school, I was quiet to myself. I wasn't familiar with the kids there, and I never quite really fit in. So when the police interviewed a lot of students from the high school, some of them told the police they might want to speak to me. So because I didn't fit in, so that got me onto the police radar. Another factor was this was really my first brush with death, and I was kind of a sentimental kid. And
Mm.
so I had like an emotional reaction to that, and the police viewed that as suspicious. Like, why is this kid who doesn't like fit in so emotional about somebody he really doesn't, he barely knew? Then they got a psychological profile, which purported to explain uh, what the psychological characteristics would be of the actual perpetrator, and I had the misfortune of matching that profile. So ultimately, the police, they engaged in this cat and mouse game with me over 6 weeks. Where half the time they talked to me as a suspect, the other half the time they pretend they needed my help to solve the crime. And before I was a teenager, I wanted to be a cop when I grew up. And Jeff as a junior detective helper theme was what the police went to. I mean, first they would question me as suspect, and I would get nervous. I'd want to get out of there, and then Jeff as this junior detective helper would be what they played up. So eventually they got me to agree to take a polygraph test. And so on a school day, they drove me across county lines about 40 minutes away by car. And, I didn't have an attorney present. They didn't give me anything to eat. And they wired me up with many cups of coffee. And then they attached me to a polygraph machine. And then they interrogated me for 6.5 to 7 hours, featuring threats and false promises and, good cop, bad cop. And eventually they got me to, by the threat of harm and promising me that I wouldn't be arrested if I just told them what they wanted, they got me to falsely confess, which resulted in my collapsing in a fetal position on the floor, crying uncontrollably. And from there, a series of circumstances unfolded, which ultimately resulted in my being wrongfully convicted of a murder and rape and winding up serving 16 years in prison prior to being exonerated by DNA testing, which identified the actual perpetrator. So all my charges were dismissed on actual innocence grounds, and he was arrested and convicted for killing the victim in my case. I just want to quickly add that left free while I was doing time for his crime, he killed the second victim 3.5 years later, who was a teacher and had 2 children. So I was in prison from 17 to 32. Yeah, I know. It's hard to process. I did a lot in a short amount of time, but I'm interested in staying true to your theme of why we work and purpose and all of that. So I didn't want to do the longer version, but certainly ask me whatever you'd like in regards to that.
So yeah, it is a nightmare, and I do have a question that is kind of lingering of something I'd like to ask, but it made me think of your time in prison.
Yes.
Did you find yourself, well, what did you find yourself doing or able to do to keep yourself busy in sort of staying on top of things and working? Was there abilities to do that? And I'm not saying, okay, people go to jail because you can go work, but I'm just wondering what you went through. That's 16 years of your life, right? So what did you do to stay active and stay busy and to come out, even though you shouldn't have been there in the first place, but come out to the point where you're now a lawyer? You got a bachelor's degree, you got a master's degree, you're a lawyer. So what did you do to stay active?
I was able to work with a purpose while I was there. And so what that entailed, which was me staying active, as you correctly state, was I used to go to a law library and study the law. And I used to collect articles about other people who were exonerated. I was trying to determine who helped them, what route did they take. I wrote a ton of letters looking for lawyers and investigators to try to help provide me with the crucial legal services that I needed to regain my freedom and overturn the conviction. But the other thing that I did, which I found meaning in, is everything I did while I was in prison, right, was geared to some kind of potential usage, if and when I returned back to society, when I regained my freedom. So I took advantage of the educational programs they had there. I got the GED, I got an associate's, I completed a year towards the bachelor's before funding was cut. And when that happened, I turned to vocational trade. So I learned to type. I took a class on general business, which pertained to the usage of the computer in the workforce. I took a computer repair class. I took a course on how adults learn and worked as a teacher's aide for a year and a half, helping other prisoners prepare for taking the GED test. I went and took plumbing. In my cell, I used to read from 1998 to 2006. I would read 3 or 4 books on nonfiction. I would read books on self-help and relationship books. I mean, I figured, well, I'm not going to get any much experience in relationships while there. But when I returned back to society, instead of having had relationships in my teens to draw back on to be successful in a new relationship, I'll have read as much as I can and fall back on that, right? As you do the best that you can. I read books on governmental abuse expose and declassified CIA books and books on presidential history. I felt like in studying those political type of topics that you could indirectly trace the collective mindset of the country as it moved from years to years, decades to decades, and in so doing, you would understand more like where we are today in the world and why things are. So those were the rationales and that I did, and I found ways to relieve stress and leave the prison mentally by playing sports. I engaged in this elaborate delusion playing basketball. When I would play basketball or ping pong or chess, I would pretend like I was a professional player and so was everyone else. And I had this worked out where we went to the gym, that was a road game, and this armory, that was at home. And, but it wasn't really like kids fantasizing. This was more like I needed to leave the prison for a couple of hours mentally. So I did that, I listened to sports talk radio on the weekend, but it wasn't listening to sports talk radio. This was a lifeline to the outside.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Sundays during NFL season. I would listen to so they gave us a television in the South. So I would have the game on, the 1 o'clock game, the 4 o'clock game, and the night game. But while doing that, because those weren't my favorite teams, I would be listening to games on the radio while watching a different game. So I just kind of like dose out on that. And I would cook a few meals in the cell in the hot pot. So I have a little routine on Sunday is what I'm getting at. So all those things I found some meaning and purpose, and I helped to preserve my sanity. And I worked this mental place out where I thought like I wasn't doing a 15 to life sentence. I thought I was doing a year or two until I went to the next legal proceeding, which I was sure that I was going to win because I was because I was innocent, and I would cut out nature pictures and hang them up on the wall and travel there mentally. So I came up with all of those things, and I found some meaning and purpose. I was able to keep going. Had the single-minded focus, and it helped me when I, was warding off. Those things all helped me in warding off feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, thoughts of giving up, suicidal ideation. I had to repeatedly fight those things off, and finding that purpose in the work that I did helped me to do that.
But Jeff, everyone's innocent. So did you find yourself when you were in the library, there's some other people there like, hey, Jeff, can you help me do this thing? But there's people there that were innocent. I mean, beside you when you were young and 16 and 17 and 18 and reading these books, because you hear that's said a lot, right? Oh, yeah, I'm innocent. No, I'm innocent. I believe you're innocent. But were there other people beside you saying the same thing, just trying to get out? Is that the mentality of trying? Or there's people, obviously there is people who have settled into they're guilty and they're going to serve out their punishment? Or is there other people that are just trying to get out any way that they can?
All of the above. Let
Yeah.
me break that down. So in general, most people do not proclaim their innocence in prison. I mean, for 2 reasons. I mean, mainly because it's a waste of time,
Yeah.
right? The other prisoners can't help you to get your freedom, and neither can the guards or any of the other civilians or prison officials. Secondly, you would never want to draw attention to yourself, because if your case is reversed, but you have to go back to trial rather than the government just acknowledging you're innocent and dropping the case, you don't want one of the other prisoners to, look at you as their way of going home sooner. They could very easily concoct a story that while you were walking around the prison yard,
Yeah.
he told me that he did it. And it wouldn't be that hard to come up with facts, because every time there's an appeal, the decision comes out in the law books, which has a factual part. So it wouldn't be hard for somebody to go and look that up and concoct a story. So there's that. There's certain contexts where proclaiming your innocence would work against you. So, for example, the prison wants you to they recommend that you take a program that's designed to address the crime for which you're incarcerated, so that you can increase your chance of being paroled. So the one for me, that would have been the sex offender training program. But the problem with taking that is you would have to admit guilt, not just saying you're guilty, but details and in writing and blow by blow account. So I refuse to, and if you refuse to do that, you either not be let in the program or you'd be kicked out. So that context, it works against you. At the parole board, they want to hear you express remorse and take responsibility and show some insight into your behavior. And I didn't do that. I maintained my innocence. So I got turned down for parole, which resulted in my doing an additional year prior to being exonerated. There's creature comforts in the prison. I mean, if you don't complete the right programs, then you can't be on the waiting list for the honor block, which has a few extra creature comforts. You could have recreation every night, you could shower every night, you could go to a store once a week rather than every 2 weeks. And you can't participate in the family reunion program, which involves there's trailers on the prison grounds, and your family could come up, say, on a Friday, and they don't leave until Sunday morning, and you stay in that trailer with them on the prison grounds. But I couldn't participate in that because I wouldn't take that program. So in those contexts, it's against, it works against you. There were many prisoners there who would say, look, man, I did what I did. I got caught, I'm not going to cry about it. I'm just going to make the best that I can, do the best I can with this and try to go home as quickly as I can. Everybody's got an angle. They're either looking for legal loopholes in their case, or they're doing this program or that program, hoping to get out, sooner one way or another, or even just complete the sentence minimum and that's it. So that was, but in the law library, there were, across my 16 years, I had explicit conversations with 3 people who maintained that they were innocent. There were 19 people that I did time with that were exonerated either before me or after me, but only 4 of them did I know were innocent ahead of time. And one of them didn't even tell me. I just saw on the news he was doing media coverage. But yeah, so that was how that went.
So you mentioned, and I can only imagine, thinking of giving up, right? However that looked, suicide or giving up, studying and trying to get exonerated.
Yes.
How long were periods of that feeling of giving up? Was it a day by day, weekly? I mean, you're talking 16 years. After the first year when I guess no one's coming, okay, the 5th year, you're like, the 10th year.
Right. I understand your question. So firstly, I lost 7 appeals along the way. And so that took up 11 years to lose the 7 appeals. So I had that going on in my mind for those 11 years. So in that time, maybe once every 6 months, the thought would cross my mind. But once the appeals were over, you're permanently locked out of the courthouse unless you can come up with some new evidence. So at that point, my legal work, right, really consisted of writing letters looking for an attorney or an investigator to try to find some new evidence, because it's pointless to go to the law library anymore because you're not allowed to make legal arguments in court unless some new decision comes down that applies to old cases. So at that point in time, thoughts of giving up, were more frequent. Maybe like every 2 or 3 months, I'd fall into a funk every 2 or 3 days. And so during those 4 years of writing letters, at times it was a challenge just to come up with, like, who was the next person or place that I was actually going to write to, and so there might be, when there was like 2 or 3 weeks that went by without my sending a letter out because I didn't have another place to try. And when I say places to try, I'm not just talking about letters to people who could help me directly, like a lawyer, an investigator, or a nonprofit entity doing this work, but I mean also indirectly. So if there was a line of reasoning that I could come up with in my own mind, like something somebody could do which could set in motion a chain of events that ultimately culminated into my getting the legal help that I needed. I wrote that letter and I laid out really quickly up front. I never assumed that everybody could understand what they could do. And so when time would go by, when I didn't write a letter for 2 or 3 weeks, that's when the feelings got strongest. The most difficult period in my life, without a doubt, in terms of this, would have been in my 15th year, because not only had my appeals been up after 11 years, but I wrote letters for 4 years, and rarely getting a response other than the occasional no. The rest of it I had to figure out was a no because like a couple of months went by and I simply didn't hear
Mhm.
back. But then I went to the parole board and I was turned down there. And at that point, I felt like I was going to die in prison for, being wrongfully convicted, crime I didn't commit. But, this person showed up. I had placed the ad in a newspaper called the Sacramento Bee, looking for a pen pal. But the process I worked out in my mind was, yeah, I'm going to look for a pen pal, and it might start out that way. But at some point in the conversation, I'm sure that what am I doing in prison? That's going to come up. And that's going to be my chance to mention that I'm innocent, make my case for that, and possibly I could convert that person to being my champion that could help build that bridge between me and the legal help. So when that person wrote me, who was a crime victim, his name was Scott, and he saw solidarity between his situation and mine, linking us as being victims of the justice system, just in different ways. I mean, I wrote him. I used to write him every week, and I was openly asking him, look, should I give up? Should I quit? Should I just commit suicide? And, we were openly discussing that back and forth in the letters, along with other things about life and sports and stuff. And he tried to give me ideas of what to do, but he was in over his head as far as that part. So I would ignore that and just focus in on, the other parts of the letter. The other thing I want to mention in terms of how I got by, actually, which is a part of an answer to the question you asked earlier in the interview, was that there was another wrongfully convicted person there named Frank Sterling, and him and we read each other's legal paperwork, so we both believed in each other's innocence because it was a false confession case also, and I had the DNA test, which didn't match me, which I was convicted of despite that, and I was later exonerated through further DNA testing, which through the data bank that identified the perpetrator. But the DNA that didn't match me was my evidence for Frank to believe that I was innocent, along with the manner in which the confession happened. But on Frank's end, there was an actual perpetrator who had confessed to 4 different civilian witnesses, and the cops had just disbelieved him. They considered he was just like, bragging in a way that a kid might do to try to draw attention. So that was how I believed in Frank's innocence. So once every 6 weeks, Frank and I would get together in the prison yard, and our conversation, half of it would be about trying to keep each other going morale-wise, and the other half of it would be that we were just brainstorming about what's the next move to make, man. What's the next letter to write? Who's the next person to contact? How can we try to overturn these wrongful convictions and regain our freedom? And we actually made a pledge to each other at one point that whoever got out first would try to help the other person, even if it was simply limited to the level of raising attention to the other person's case. And as it turned out, I was released first. But during the press conference of my release, in the middle of that, I started talking about Frank's case. And so when eventually he was exonerated a couple of years later, a local reporter remembered that, and he wrote like a local story, because I'm in one part of New York State, what was in Westchester, where my case was, and Frank's was like 5 hours away up north. But the local reporter remembered that, and he wrote the story, titling it "I Believed in His Innocence." And I liked it so much, I framed it, and that's actually in the office of a nonprofit organization, which I started using. Which as you know, I started using. I started it by using some of the compensation that I had received. I had committed $1.5 million for the money that I got as compensation, just with the idea of reaching back, finding purpose and meaning, in doing advocacy work to try to free similarly situated people. And I do believe that that's my purpose in the world, and that's how I make sense of everything that happens to me.
Yes, that's your mission now, is to help fight wrongfully convicted people in prison. And I mean, it's a true inspiration. I think you being a teenager, getting out and being a man and seeing the world must have an amazingly wonderful perspective. And I would think, but there's hopeful people out there, a little disappointment in how you see people waste their time. Because I'm looking at a man who, you were in the library, you were writing letters, you got your education, your GET, your associates, you got a 1 year of college, you learned typing, you're repairman, plumber, learn about the government. You and you would probably say, yeah, I wasted some time, but you used a lot of your time very well, and to come out of the world and into the world and see the way some people are wasting their time and using a lot of excuses not to work. How is your perspective on what you see with the youth today, generally speaking, or people, and how would you encourage people about getting their first job, and how they could start looking into doing that?
Yeah, I do look at it like a lot of people are wasting their time. I mean, when I was released, I was given scholarship, so I got the bachelor's, and that's where I got the master's and the law degree. Started the organization and did all this advocacy work, and even have a large body of work that my endorsement's been sought in 10 different political races where justice reform and wrongful conviction is part of the plank. So even people running for office see that their perception is, well, if this guy endorses me and basically blesses me and my platform, that could be influential in helping me to get a few more votes other than what would be the case. So I am dismayed when I see people, whether it's youth or even just adults, just wasting their time. I have a couple of sayings that I apply to myself, and it really frustrates me that people don't act on this. Look, there are no reasons why you can't do something. Okay, there might be reasons why why it's going to be difficult, why you might have to work 2 or 3 times harder than would be the case. There's only reasons why something might be difficult. There's not, if you want it bad enough and you're willing to go all out and work really, really hard, then I believe that you'll achieve your goals. That there's a very good chance that a door will open for you. But you just have to be flexible enough to walk through it. Remember, the goal is the goal, okay? The route, you have to have a plan, but that plan, that route, that's not the goal, okay? The goal is not I want to get to X, but I have to travel up the alphabet. No, the goal is I got to get to X, period, end of story. So I love the opportunities that being free brings, I mean, education-wise, and there's so many ways to do things. So it does bother me that people waste their time, and it does bother me that so many people, they have dreams or things that they want to do, and they tell me about it, and I say, okay, well, what's your plan? Well, no, that's just a pipe dream, or well, nothing, I'm locked in for this practical reason, or or that one. And, well, if I did that, I'd have to give this up, or look, this lifestyle I'm living through the income I'm getting from my job, I would have to start over to ultimately get to where I want to be at, and I'm not willing to take that temporary step back. And that does this me. And I think to myself, well, that's not really your dream, not really. Or it's sad that you're choosing not to pursue it. I mean, look, I took a step back in pay. I mean, I at one point, because I was a weekly columnist also, I caught on as a weekly columnist for a newspaper for 5 years. And at one point, just to try to make ends meet, I got an additional job with them, making like $600 a week. But it was a dead end job, and I was miserable. I toughed it out for 6 months, and I finally said, look, this doesn't make any sense. This is a dead end job. It's not really any money. I'm going to take a pay cut. Okay, I'm going to stop doing this dead end job, going into the office Monday through Friday. I'm going to sacrifice, and I'm going to go to grad school. I'm going to get a master's degree. I'm going to come back out into the job market and see what can I find then. So in the same way that I made those sacrifices, I feel like other people can find a way to try to do it. But people don't seem that committed to that. I don't feel like they take advantage of all the opportunities in the world that there is. So that's one thing. But the other thing that dismays me is that I don't feel like that, again, generically and across the board, I don't feel like people are really committed to a balanced life. In other words, there's a time for work and, of course, business before pleasure, but there should be a time period where you do something fun. But a lot of people seem to me to be living a lifestyle. They get up in the morning, they go to work, they come home, they cook dinner, they watch an hour or two of television, and they go to sleep, right? Rinse, wash, repeat. Whereas for me, when my work day is over, whatever time that is, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever it is, I'm looking to do something recreational, something fun for a couple hours before I go to sleep, And so it doesn't, it doesn't seem to be that to me that people are that committed to, living a balanced life. And I just feel like working at some job that's not making a difference, or working at something that you hate doing, living for the weekends, can't wait till I retire in 20, 30 years from now because I hate what I'm doing. I just feel like that's a very sad way of living life. I don't feel like that's as fulfilling a way, a meaningful a way to live life.
It's pretty. I would like to sit on a subway beside you talking to some kid who has, or some lady or some man who has all these excuses, and if I know your story, and they're saying, well, I just have to get some of these opportunities. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to know. And I'm just thinking of you writing letter after letter, and you're waiting for that opportunity for your jail cell to open. That was your ticket of opportunity. And these people are just looking for, someone to give them an interview or one of those things. Quite different. But I think, yeah, being dismayed is an accurate way, and not, it's generally speaking, but a lot of people are letting time slip through their hands and they're free.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, when you're free, you have enough. When you're free, if you don't have some, debilitating illness that's confining you to a bed, or you're terminally ill, if you're free, that you got a shot. I mean, so what if you're older than
Hmm.
what normally would be the case? I mean, it might come down to it's now or never at this non-traditional age. And to me, it's always better to be now rather than later. And I do think that it's important to have a plan that you're always working towards. But if you don't have a plan, and that you're going to be able to proactively go out and try to execute, then you're not going to get there. I don't believe in a pie in the sky. Everything's going to turn out well just because, or that one day somebody or some opportunity is going to appear out of nowhere. I don't think that that's going to happen in general. But if you have a executable plan that involves you being proactive, you taking steps and doing things, then I think opportunity and luck and fortune will find you.
Jeff, what about the things that you're doing now? What are you doing full time? What takes up your time, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, so I'm engaging in advocacy right now. So I'm trying to raise money for the organization. We have a bunch of volunteers. I couldn't write large checks every month. I did that for like 3 years. So I'm trying to raise money to again have a full-time staff, which would increase our capacity for how many cases we could do and how many different states that we could work on policy changes. I mean, right now we have 10 cases that are active, and we're trying to change laws in 3 different states. So I have a way of operating in the meantime, again with volunteers. But ultimately, I'd like to have a paid staff again. So that takes up some of my time. Uh, and I have entered some of those cases as co-counsel now that I'm attorney. But I'm also meeting. I'm also doing policy work. So I'm regularly meeting with elected officials. I'm the liaison to the coalition group to the exoneree community. So I reach out to other exonerees and I get them on the different calls so that people can hear their stories also. I do a lot of speaking engagements virtually, more virtual now, but some in person. And I do a lot of media interviews. I mean, it's my job to be the face of the organization. So I do a lot of that also. Twice a year, I teach the ethics class in a police academy. They bring me in to co-teach that, and I've been fortunate to be in front of some non-traditional audiences. So my message of wrongful conviction and criminal justice reform being about justice and accuracy, and not anti-police, not anti-prosecutor, but definitely anti-rogue cop, definitely against prosecutors that are breaking the law
Yeah.
and violating rights. So that message is well received. So the police academies is one example of that. But I speak sometimes in front of groups of prosecutors, and sometimes in front of groups of judges. They ask me to address one wrongful conviction topic or not. So all those different things, and emails and phone calls, and I do my own scheduling. So all of that non-traditional things, if it's related to the mission, I consider it to be falling within that broader definition of advocacy. So that's what takes my time. I work 50, 60 hours a week. I don't get paid for it, but look, it's a labor of love. I was compensated, and I have that invested conservatively. And so it gives me a certain amount of money every month just through dividends and interest. And that serves in lieu of a salary. And that allows me to spend my time doing this work.
Could you speak on restorative justice and what that is? I remember looking into it a few years ago, wrote a paper, posted it online, and it was amazing to me. It's something that I think in our heart of hearts, we all have a, inkling to understand and appreciate, but not knowing that it's a real thing and that people are really fighting for it.
Yes, so yeah, I definitely know about restorative justice. So firstly, I sit on the Global Advisory Council of Restorative Justice International, and what that looks like, and then I'll come to restorative justice itself. But what that looks like is, so they're an international organization, and I advise them on wrongful conviction issues. And so, I lay an issue out and show all sides of it, regardless of my opinion. And then the next part of it is I give my opinion of what position I think the group should take. And the group also does endorse, again, political people running for district attorney or other political positions in terms of where they are on justice issues. And I do weigh in on other criminal justice issues. But coming directly to what restorative justice is, so restorative justice, is an approach to crime, which it says that let's try to restore people back to the position where they were prior to the incident happening, or even just a traumatic life event happening. It doesn't necessarily have to have been a crime or arrest involved. And so that applies to wrongful conviction in a number of ways. So it applies on a societal level. So society, should try to restore the people that it wrongfully convicted back to the place as best they can. So there should be financial compensation. There should be reentry services provided on day one. Things like housing, cost of living, mental health services, doctor, dental care, access to public transportation, job training, job placement, class on technology. It applies with the municipalities that are sued for the wrongdoing of its agents, of them, issuing an apology with a settlement, an acknowledgement that something they did something wrong, and then trying to change some laws, policies, procedures so that the next person won't be wrongfully convicted, at least not in the same way. I had a powerful experience with it. So I spent several weekends with the family of the victim that I was wrongfully convicted of murdering and raping. So I spent a couple of weekends with them at their house at their invitation. It was kind of a really dramatic healing conversation. So they shared with me that they spent so much time thinking that I was the person, who, killed their daughter, killed their sister, and I was hated by at least one of them. But on the other hand, I mean, I had the chance to again say in person, look, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. And I explained, how it came to be that I was coerced into the falsely confessing for it. But I also feel other applications. I mean, you rarely see this, but I think that any of the people directly involved with somebody being falsely accused or wrongfully convicted, they really should try to make amends to that person. I mean, I never got an apology from anybody that was directly involved in my case. I got the symbolic apology from the modern day district attorney, from the prosecutor in the courtroom, and from the judge that oversaw the proceedings where I was cleared. But they weren't the people that was involved in what originally happened to me. So I never actually got that. But then also law enforcement to the second victim family members. A school teacher, Patricia Morrison. She was killed, and she had two children. She was killed by the perpetrator because he was left free while I was doing time for his crime, and that was because of the illegal and immoral acts that the police and other actors in the justice system engaged in. So it really had an application there. But examples of in more traditional settings in terms of restorative justice, they have a program called Sycamore Tree, and it involves crime victims, often murder victim survivor family members, going into the prison and meeting with people who've been, presumably rightfully convicted of killing people. And so that those conversations can be dramatic and healing on both for both parties. And so there has been success that way.
With that success and having the perspective that you had, do you find it's generally speaking that there's a lot of failure for the system,
Yeah, yes.
incarceration system itself, in that people are not being helped and they're not? Is that what you're finding, that the majority of the people, what is the adage that says prisons make criminals, right? Or it makes people worse in that sense? Is that what you found in your experience?
It is what I found in my experience. I mean, I don't think that, the prison system is, is, despite the name Department of Corrections, it's not there
It's funny,
to,
that name. Until you
yeah,
said
it's
it,
supposed to be correcting
that
people.
name is just for me, because I know from my hometown we have Department of Corrections, and you don't think correction, it's the jail, right? That's what you
Yeah,
even automatically think.
yeah, exactly. I mean, there's more of a punitive approach, but it's not rehabilitative, because if it was, they would have college education for prisoners. They would have the vocational trades that were up to date. They wouldn't allow the verbal abuse to go on by the guards to the prisoners. They would find a way to tamp down the prisoner on prisoner violence, and there would be an environment that encouraged, rehabilitation. Whereas in the system as it is now, it's all punitive, and whatever rehabilitation takes place there, it takes place despite the system rather than because of it, and that to me is very troubling.
Jeff, in the organization that you have, the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, and the coalition that you're in, what is some satisfaction that you get, but what is also some difficulty that you have in doing what you do?
Yeah, in terms of the satisfaction that I get, well, that would be the 10 people that we helped to free that were wrongfully imprisoned. As far as the foundation, the coalition group, it could happen to you. Some of our successes and satisfactions there are we helped to pass 3 laws. We passed a law that would provide accountability for prosecutors. We passed another law aimed at tweaking that. We passed a law um, called discovery law, which pertains to sharing information from the prosecution to the defense automatically early on in the process, so that both sides have access to the evidence. And we also helped pass a law in Pennsylvania which would automatically expunge anybody's record who'd ever been charged with a crime if if the case ended in something other than a conviction. So whenever you pass laws, that's extremely satisfying. I get satisfaction when I do meet with an elected official and they get it. They seem to get it verbally, and there's actions that I can point to afterwards that, or you change viewpoint, you change hearts and minds of general people. That's also very rewarding. In terms of struggles and challenges and difficulties, I would say, well, the bane of the whole nonprofit world, right? I mean, raising money. I mean, it's very difficult. It's hard to raise money. There's a lot of money being thrown around right now in today's climate. I see large amounts of money purporting to change hands in the media, and I'm looking at the receiving entities, and I'm thinking, well, they don't have a plan, though. It's great to have rallies or protests in the street, but if you don't have specific concrete asks, if there's no game plan, if there's no other work being done in connection with that, that feels frustrating to me, because I could only imagine if I had even a tenth of whatever money was changing hands. I'd love to be able to increase my capacity. It frustrates me that we have 7 cases that are approved right now where we believe the people are innocent and we see a potential way to win that case, but they're just sitting there inactive. They're waiting, because I don't have the capacity right now in order to move forward on them. Whereas if we had the funding that we needed, then we would, those cases would not be waiting, and people, there would be work going on in the cases. It frustrates me when I see, athletes, they take a knee, or they, but they're not spending their their time. They're not actually doing any work. If they would adopt a particular issue in a particular organization that was doing work, use their increased public profile, to throw light to that issue and to that organization. If they would help them raise money, maybe there was a night where, in one way or another, where their involvement would encourage people to contribute money. If they would write a check themselves personally also while they're at it, a fraction of, a small amount of what, but if there would be something there, but they're held up as taking this big stand, I mean, that's a little bit frustrating to me. And again, I think, well, gee, man, if I really had people with a higher profile, I could get even more traction. And maybe the last thing I'll say is this. So I do a lot of media. I make regular appearances on television, radio, print media, new media such as podcasts, blogs, blog talk radio, that kind of thing. That said, I'm tired of being the best known unknown. Yeah, I have name recognition in criminal justice reform circles and in the innocence movement, but I'm not, I'm not a household name by any means. I'm not a celebrity. But I think, well, what else do I have to do to try to get to the next level to increase my profile so that my message of, wrongful conviction and broader justice reform, how can I amplify that? How can I become even, a stronger tool for the cause? And, I don't really have an answer for that. I am a proactive person, as I mentioned before. I don't have the plan in place for how to get there. I'm not sure what else.
It's pretty amazing. You think about it, there's a lot more people in the world that are famous for a lot less. And
right.
You're spending millions of your own dollars, countless hours of your own time. You have helped free at least 10 people and probably encouraged other people to go help other people to do so.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
And you got a glass ceiling above your head, like saying, I'm here to do work that all you people are saying that you care for and don't really actually do.
Yes, exactly. And it I'd love to have a book deal in place. I mean, I have a book that's 95% written, but I want there to be a major publishing company that has a budget that can actually push it, that has a marketing budget that can get it shelf space and set up, book signing tours. And can I get my movie out there? Could I have a movie? But I see all the things happening, but it hasn't as yet happened for me. So at times, look, I'm impatient to do good. Let's put it that way. And, so sometimes it does get frustrating. And I hope that along the way, I'm going to follow my own advice. I'm going to keep working hard, and I'm going to hope that a door opens for me. But look, maybe somebody even listening to the podcast now, might be that person.
And Jeff, you're a young man too. I know you lost a lot of time, but you're still a young man. So that we both have hope for what is a goal? You're kind of touching on a few things, like a movie, a book, and getting out there a little bit more. Do you have an overarching goal for your foundation or some of the coalitions you're working with?
Yes. Yeah. So in terms of my foundation, the overarching goal is I would ultimately like to have a office in each state and ultimately in each country, because I see wrongful conviction as being a worldwide issue. And the countries where we don't hear about wrongful conviction, it will be people being exonerated. It's not because wrongful convictions aren't happening. They're not being corrected. There are no people working on it. I mean, some countries, their justice system is so antiquated that there is actually no means for somebody to bring new evidence back into court. So that's a long-term aspiration. And in terms of the coalition group, it could happen to you. We have expanded since our successes in New York. We have expanded into Pennsylvania, where we did pass a law on expungement. We're working on the accountability for prosecutors and exoneree compensation. So Pennsylvania is one of 15 states where there is no compensation for exonerees. We have a chapter in California where, again, we're trying to have the oversight of prosecutors, and we think there's an opportunity to get rid of capital punishment, because as we see it, capital punishment, amongst many other things, it definitely risks the execution of innocent people. So my overarching goal with that coalition group is we would love to have a chapter in each state. We'd love to run campaigns in each state. But again, we need to try to raise funds. I mean, the person who started the organization, who actually works part-time for my foundation, is part-time. So for him to spend all of his time doing that, he's not like me. He hasn't been compensated, where he's, has income coming in. He's got to make a living. So he's part-time now. But if we were able to raise money, he'd be able to spend all of his time doing that. So I'm kind of like we're like Batman and Robin. So look, I bring the media attention. I bring a lot more moral authority because I was wrongfully convicted, whereas he was simply falsely accused of a rape, but he was acquitted. I'm the liaison to the exonerated community, and my case is really what we lead with, supplemented by the other exonerees. But on his end of it, he was and Bill Bassick is his name. So he was a Monroe. He was a county legislator. He was a legislator for just the local town, and he also worked as a staffer for an assemblyman. So he brings the inside baseball knowledge of politics as far as legislation and how things get done. He brings the organizing and streamlining, and he makes the call on the different tactics that we do. I mean, I weigh in strategically, but he knows what moves to make. So we work together. And in fact, him and I, along with one other person who's an attorney, we're the only three people that are in common to all three chapters of the of the coalition. So those are our aspirations. And I think in terms of, the same thing really with Restorative Justice International. I mean, the idea would be, for them to be able to, get some funding, to then have some staff people to, to assist the president, Lisa Ray, in her work, rather than her doing a lot of it and just having some volunteers. But when you have people that are employees, they can spend 40 hours doing something rather than volunteers who squeeze pockets of time. And we all are greatly appreciative of volunteers, don't get me wrong. There's a difference between doing something on the side versus that is the main thing that you do. You can get so much more done the other way.
Jeff, I agree with all your goals, and I think they're all attainable. The one thing when you mentioned it, I'm just thinking about, you mentioned capital punishment. So would your goal be to get rid of capital punishment 100% regardless?
Yes.
That would be. And I come from Canada. We don't have capital punishment. I'm not sure when the last one was a hanging in, I don't know, the 40s or 50s or something like that. They did something, but they've since done away with it. But I'm just thinking, and I'm not an educated man, but I'm just thinking the idea, the logic of, getting rid of cars because someone might die, but getting rid of capital punishment just because someone innocent could die. Do you know what little logical line I'm throwing there? So
Of course I do. Let me answer that though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me answer that. Okay, so my response to that would be that I don't think it's as infrequent occurrence as people. I mean, there's conservative estimates, not estimates from people that are of conservative political point of view, right? That estimate, there's a 4% error rate on that. So there's that. There's been a lot of people who've been exonerated off of death row, which kind of begs the question: how many, innocent people
have died?
There right. But look, the fight against capital punishment doesn't rest on that, though.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's really where I win. And I'm going to just quickly mention the other arguments in a nutshell. So we find that a lot of murder victim family members are now opposed to the death penalty because they say that that it doesn't bring them any actual solace, that the increased media attention actually rips the scabs off of difficult wounds. So there's that. There's the economic resource argument. I mean, the death penalty is very expensive. So from 1995 to 2004, when New York had a death penalty, we spent $200 million and nobody was executed. I mean, the money could have went crime prevention, other social programs. There's an argument that killing people who kill in order to show that killing is wrong is kind of a circular reasoning. I think that it lowers society down to the level of the murderer. There isn't any deterrence effect. That's a fallacy. In fact, often states that have the highest murder rate have capital punishment. In fact, there's also a concept called brutalization, which means that after there is a state-sanctioned execution, that there typically is a spike in the number of murders um, that that um, that happen. So all of those. So when you bring in all those arguments against the death penalty, and then you think about, there's like a racial bias. So if the murder victim is white, then the defendant is much more likely to receive the death penalty than if the murder victim was black. So there's a type of devaluation of human life that goes on. There's a certain amount of arbitrariness involved. So seeking the death penalty is discretionary, and so it would depend on what the local politics are of the district attorney in terms of who the death penalty is actually sought against. So just where the crime happens, that plays a factor, and the point is that that it's kind of arbitrary. Often district attorneys use such cases in order to try to further their own political career. Same thing for prosecutors that are in the courtroom. They're trying to move up and get that big win rather than the focus being justice. So that would be another argument. As a country, we're not supposed to execute people that have mental health issues, but it happens. Courts don't enforce that. So I mean, how low can you go morally and execute somebody who? I remember Ricky Ray Rector. I mean, the story, who was executed. Bill Clinton was the governor, actually, in Arkansas, and he was in the middle of his presidential run, and he declined to step in and prevent the execution of Ricky. And he left his cell. He had gotten a piece of apple pie as dessert for his last meal, and he left a slice of pie in his cell because when he leaving to be executed, thinking he was gonna eat it when he came back in. He never understood he wasn't coming back to a cell, that it was sick.
I mentioned to you at the
So
beginning
just
that yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. No, yeah, go ahead.
No, just one example of many other examples. I mean, we've had executions in the U.S. as of late. I mean, Sedley Ali, Larry Swearingen, people who've been executed that were simply their lawyers and them were saying, look, can you just stop the execution so I can get the DNA testing? Okay, can we at least please make sure? I'm telling you I'm innocent. Can I have the evidence tested so I can prove that before you go ahead with it? And people just being executed anyway without even getting the chance to do that. And I do want to speak out on that, the spate of executions that happened as President Trump's last couple of months in office. There's such a rush to go. I mean, it's unseemly. It's terrible. We don't publicize it. Why not show an execution, right? If it's considered to be too ghastly to show an execution, then maybe we shouldn't do it. If you got to do something in the darkness of the night, people can't see it. Isn't that kind of a tacit admission that there's something wrong going on there?
That it leads to the question. I said, a lingering question. I wasn't sure how to word it exactly, but where or when does the balance in the search for justice meet forgiveness? So in the case of you, like, I would have been so upset, distraught, and not saying that you weren't or you were, but the idea of forgiving those prosecutors and all of that in your pursuit of justice. How did you balance that out and not just being resentful? I mean, because you don't seem like you're an unforgiving
No, I'm definitely
person.
not angry. I'm definitely not angry. I'm definitely not resentful. So my first week home, I was angry. And, and I had heard and saw on the news when other people had been exonerated before me and they had said that they weren't angry. And, I thought that was just the silliest thing ever. And so when I was asked, well, when I was released, well, are you angry? I mentioned everything that I had lost. And I didn't go to high school prom. I didn't graduate high school. I didn't finish college. I missed. I'm not married with family. All these years I've lost births, deaths, weddings, rites of passage. So if all you lost that, okay, let me ask you, would you be angry? So I kind of threw it back at them. So I was angry that first week, but I felt like it. But at the end of that week, I felt like I'm destroying myself here. I felt like I was destroying myself. I felt, like um, I lost so much already. Why would I want to, in effect, give them the rest of the rest of my life? I want to live as meaningful in a life as I can. I don't think I can do that if I'm angry or bitter. It's not like if I was angry, I would be impacting the people that had a
Any more
hand in what
productive?
happened to
Yeah.
me. I mean, yeah. Look, I regret to say that if it would adversely affect them, then maybe it would have been kind of tempting to be angry anyway. But look, the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take that energy and I channel it into the advocacy work. That brings me to a point. Give me like half a second. I want to share a short vignette. Just
Go
from.
ahead. Yes.
Thank you, please. So from reading from reading books about search for higher meaning and elevating. I remember I was in court. I was in court at a deposition in the course of my lawsuit, where my lawyer's strategy was, look, in order to prove that they forced you to confess, Jeff, um, we're gonna prove here. So there was your confession, which matched up completely with the police theory of how the crime happened. So to prove that they put that in you, that they planted that and they forced that out of you, we're gonna prove how the actual crime happened. And then we're going to have to contrast. And so the conclusion would be inescapable. The way we're going to do that is we are going to call the actual criminal, the actual perpetrator, as a witness for him to testify as to how the crime happened. That's going to be the way that we prove this. So we're in the federal courthouse, and it's just a court. A deposition is a court proceeding, but there's no judge that's present. It's just lawyers.
I wanted to interrupt you. I wanted to interrupt you to ask what a deposition was, but thank you for clarifying.
Sure, but there is someone taking
Yeah.
the notes, the
Yeah.
note, right? But there's no judge there. There's no judge, right? So it's just to make a record of it, right? And so as the deposition is nearing the end of the morning, my lawyer, he nudges me, he elbows me and says, hey Jeff, ha ha ha, they're gonna they're gonna burn him for lunch, meaning that he's not gonna eat. They're not going to give him anything to eat, and he's laughing about it. And I say, wait a minute, what do you mean by that? Oh, they're not giving him to eat. Just F him. He's a piece of blank.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I said, no. He's going to eat. He said, look, why do you care? Jeff, listen, let's put this in perspective. Okay. He killed 2 people, and he was content to let you sit there and you wound up doing 16 years for his crime because he didn't want to be a man and step up and say what he did. So, why do you care? Repeating, F him. So I said, no, listen, he's going to eat. As a matter of fact, you're going to make sure he eats. You're going to ask him when we come back here this afternoon, you're going to ask him if he eats. Okay. And if you don't, I will. Okay. Yeah, it's terrible what he did. He's a horrible person. He should pay for what he did. That's why he's incarcerated right now. Okay, he got 20 years for killing the victim in my case, and that added on. He had got 20 years for killing the second victim, and he had served 13. So he was down to 7. But he got another 20 for killing the victim. In my case, that's 27, right? So his punishment is the loss of freedom, okay? Not being mistreated. So I made sure that he ate. He was asked, after lunch, did you eat? Were you given something to drink? And, I feel like as a human being, that was one of my proudest moments.
You weren't angry at him.
Yeah. I was not. And dehumanization was not an option. And it was all about me, my doing the right thing. It wasn't about him. That was secondary. That's the main thing in all of these things. And that's an ultimate, so those principles, and also, like you said, it's another display of just of not being angry.
This has given some good insight into you. Jeff, is there anything else that you would like people that they may not understand about you, that if they understood this, they would have a better appreciation of the work that you're doing? Something that they may not understand about you?
Sure. The thing that people might not understand about, I think they definitely would understood that I'm driven, right? What I think that they would not understand is look, my head is the right size. My head's not swollen. Okay, my feet are firmly on the ground. Okay, I'm just Jeff. I have my role to play. I'm doing what I can, and I'm just a person who's trying to, I'm trying to make a difference. I'm trying to make the world a better place. But look, I don't have an ego. I'm just a tool in all of this. So I think that people maybe don't understand,
Hmm.
that aspect of it. And doing this work, this isn't about me because I'm home, I'm free, I'm compensated. I think the odds of my ever being wrongfully convicted again are extremely low, if not non-existent. So it's not about me anymore. It's about other people. It's about making a difference. So I don't know that people understand that it's not an ego thing for me, that I'm somebody who's humble. And I think maybe they don't understand that the secondary criminal justice reform issues, things like college education and prison, things like solitary confinement and prison reform and prison reentry and college education for prisoners, and elderly, releasing the elderly from prison who often age out of crime, that I care about those issues. I care about parole reform. I care about the issue called ban the box, which is, people shouldn't have to disclose their record when they're being interviewed for a job until after the employer makes a job offer, and then it's disclosed. And then if they withdraw the offer, they have to have a rationale. But
Hmm.
just discriminating against people for employment,
So
the
ban
disturbing.
the checkbox of if you're a
Correct.
criminal or something.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and some schools, some colleges have this disturbing practice where they want people to check the box also. And to me, if someone is applying to college,
To go to school.
they must be planning a crime-free life, right? In order to do
Yeah.
that. So I think that people don't understand that I care about, or that those other criminal justice reform issues are also very important, and that I care about those issues also, and that while I can't and don't spearhead those issues, I do lend my voice to them at strategic times and places, with other entities when they give me opportunity, or if I'm doing something such as this interview now, and I get a chance to, the conversation goes where I can bring the issues up. I do make my little contribution to those, and I do believe that as a country, we need to do better in terms of, criminal justice reform. And look, broadly, look, all those things, right? Dehumanization is not an option, and too many times, it is an option. Too many times it is an option, and it said to me, we need to improve the general justice system.
It sounds like you don't, what you want people to understand is you don't have an axe to grind in a hateful way, but you have a mission to lead and a purpose to help people.
Correct. Yes. And again, if people watch the documentary short Conviction on Amazon Prime, they'll see that, because in that I am railing against the things that I just mentioned, and compassionate release. And I remember how people had filed paperwork asking for compassionate release, which is, look, you've been determined to be terminally ill, and the idea is you don't have to die in prison. You could
Hmm.
spend a little bit of time, and by the time the system makes a decision, and someone's released, I remember, the word reached back to prison. They died the next day or 2 days later, or, decisions. By the time the decisions got to the prison, the prison had the prisoner had passed away already. How the medical care is just bottom of the barrel, and how the answer for everything seems to be, over the counter medication. I remember there was a prisoner there who, I was walking. I was walking on the bottom floor of the cell block, and as I was passing by someone that I knew, he was struggling to walk, and I could see the sweat on his forehead. And I stopped and I said, "Hey, you okay?" And he said, "Yo, I got pains in my chest, man. I feel like I'm dying, but they told me that I was okay, and they gave me some Tylenol, and they told me come back in the morning." And he was literally right. He was dying. I mean, and that night he passed away of a heart attack. He had a heart attack. So
They gave him Tylenol.
yeah. So I mean, come on, that should be far beyond the scope of punishment. I mean, the punishment is supposed to be the loss of freedom. It's not supposed to be mistreated and abused in countless number of ways that are par for course every day in prison.
Jeff, thinking about this podcast of Why We Work and you being in some of the lowest parts of your life and people being in some of the lowest parts that they are in their lives, and also just forgetting their purpose in life. Do you have any encouragement for people? Last couple questions. Do you have any encouragement for people into pursuing work? Because even though work is tough, work is good.
Yes, my encouragement would be for everybody to make something of your life, to chase what your dreams are, and look, whatever difficult situation that you found yourself in, not only look for a plan to try to raise yourself above that, but then do like I did, like turn back to the people still in that position that you were once in and try to help them. And you can find meaning in work doing it that way. So I would encourage people. I would encourage people to do that, and I do strongly believe in education. As something to go along with the meaningful work. I feel like the extra credentials, generally speaking, can help you, and hence my finishing the bachelor's, getting the master's, the law degree.
It reminds me, I don't know if it's right or not, but of the Titanic when it was in the movie,
Mm,
when it was sinking and some of the higher class people got off the boat and they didn't want to let more people on the boat, but then there was other people like, no, we got to go back and save them, and that's what you're saying. You got you
yes.
got to you got to go back. You were just rescued from this sinking ship. Go back
That's
and
exactly what I'm saying. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And so look, that's true across the board. It's not limited to wrongful conviction, false accusation. Any walk of life, from women that, have escaped abusive relationships to, people that have managed to survive cancer, to people who've had difficulties in escaping oppressive regimes, or people, the difficulties in, the foster care system and all those deficiencies. I mean, you name it, you can apply that generically across the board. I mean, there is a saying that, people closest to a problem, and I'm paraphrasing, but people closest to a problem are often closest to its solution.
very good. Jeff, is there anything else that we haven't touched upon that you'd like to mention, or is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just wanted to keep in mind that, all these things that we're talking about, it could happen to you. It could happen to anybody. It transcends class and race. I mean, yes, minorities are more likely to be wrongfully convicted, but numerically that's true. To throw some quick stats, someone is, a black person in the United States is 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder, 3.5 more times likely to be wrongfully convicted of sexual assault. And if you were to add up the exonerations, yes, there's more minorities than not. But that being said, I'm as white as you can get, and it happened to me, and it has happened to many other people. So it does transcend race and class. So I think everyone has a stake in the fight, and so I'd like to see more people to get involved. It's not just a particular walk of life that this happens to, or this could never happen to me. So there'd be that. But look, I have a crazy dream. My crazy dream is, and maybe I shouldn't even demean it by saying crazy, but I'd like to see what if there was 25,000 people that were willing to part with $3 on a recurring monthly basis through the foundation's Patreon website.
Mhm.
That would give us close to a budget close to $1 million. So if we could have the type of results we've gotten on a shoestring budget, imagine if we were really armed for bear. So that would be my dream. So maybe there's people that are listening that can help me get out of my network and get into the networks of other people, just sharing that, whether it's social media or if it's not illegal and it's not unethical, everything goes. Okay, creative solutions here. So that would be something. And look, if you're someone that, can offer a platform to the cause, I'd encourage you to do it. And maybe some celebrity or higher profile person, maybe this could reach them and they could help in whatever way that could, which wouldn't take away from what they're doing. So that would just, I need some help. The bottom line is I need some help to do. I've done a lot. I have some people that are helping me, but I also need a lot more help too, as well. This is much, bigger than just what one person, even assisted with the people that I have can do.
Jeff, how can they reach you, your foundation, your collaborations that you're doing?
Yes,
How can
yeah.
they
So
get in
the
touch?
website, absolutely. Sure, a number of ways. So our website is www.deskovic.org. That's deskovic.org. They can Google me. The page will come up. I am on social media, so I do have a public figure page on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I have a LinkedIn account, so people can certainly reach me through any of those any of those means.
Jeff, I think you're an inspiration, and if anyone did a small percentage of the stuff that you did in your short life so far, we could move a lot of the barriers that are stopping people from being free. And I appreciate you for your time, and I appreciate you. Oh, and I actually have one more question for you, but I do appreciate it. Is why do you
Mhm.
work?
I work I work to make a difference. I I work to stop what happened to me from happening to other people, and I work to rescue people who the same thing which happened to me happened to them. That's why I work.
And you are helping people.
I work to make a difference, and I wish everybody who listened to the podcast would similarly work to make a difference in whatever field that might be.
Jeff Deskovic, thank you kindly, sir. As I said, I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much.